Hey everyone, Skeletor here. What I'm going to do today is show you how to go over Warcraft logs for the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch. A lot of this information will also carry over to Battle for Azeroth, but once we are into the first raid tier, I will make an updated video guide for that. So starting off here, we have a randomly selected log. So we can see here this was for Fellhounds of Sargeras Mythic. And starting off, we can go for the talents. He is using Righteous Verdict, which is pretty much correct. Any single target encounter or one or two target encounter, you're going to use Righteous Verdict. He's using Fires of Justice, which is okay. And that row is very competitive. People can either use Hammer of Wrath, Fires of Justice, or Blade of Wrath. They are all perfectly viable. He's using Wake of Ashes, which is a standard choice. And also using Inquisition, which is a standard choice because he is also using the Soul of the High Lord ring. If he wasn't using that ring, he would want to have Divine Purpose talented, as Divine Purpose is currently our best talent in that row. But anyways, we'll jump into the damage done here. On first glance, everything seems appropriate. The first thing that stands out is that he had 2 casts of Divine Storm. We no longer want to use Divine Storm on 2 targets unless Divine Judgment is talented. That shares the same row as Wake of Ashes and Consecration. He's using Wake of Ashes, so that should not be happening. It's probably just a bit of a muscle memory from pulling the dogs together and Divine Storming while they're together. So make sure you're not doing that unless you do have Divine Judgment talented. And again, he's using Cape here, so we want to look at his Templar's Verdict casts. Just let me go back. If you ever see it doesn't show the number of casts, the number of hits is a good indicator, so you used it 51 times. But you can also just click on the skill name and it will properly update here. So we'll use our little source filter here for the Cape buff, or the Whispers of the Nathrazim. So we can see here, this is the total number of buffed Cape casts, so 22 plus 13 is 35. He had 51 casts total. And also, an important note here, that he was also using Divine Storm. The Divine Storm can be buffed by that as well, so I want to go ahead and double check that. Change list to Divine Storm. So one of his Divine Storm casts was buffed. So we're sitting around the 68% range, 70% of his skills buffed using the Cape. That is appropriate now in the pre-patch. Around 70% is probably around the minimum that you would want to be to use the Cape. So he's pretty much where he should be. He could obviously have a bit better uptime on the Cape, but around 70% is good enough. One thing we can also do here is we can look for Righteous Verdict. Now again, let me switch back to Templar's Verdict here. So we'll change the source aura here to Righteous Verdict. So we've got 27 and 17, so we have 44 of his Templar's Verdicts were buffed by Righteous Verdict. That's about 86%. 86% is pretty good. He probably could have had a few more percentage. One of the things that caused it to be lower is those 2 Divine Storm casts. So he could have had potentially 1 or 2 more attacks buffed by Righteous Verdict. But other than that, that's pretty good. You definitely want to aim for that 86-85% buffed range when using Righteous Verdict. So that all adds up good. So one of the common things that we always check is the opener. How did the person perform their opener? So we'll go to Timelines, we'll go to Casts, we'll get rid of Templar's Verdict there first. We'll go to Timelines, there we go, Timelines Cast, now we got our opener. And we can see here, it took him a few seconds to get into his opener. And he started off with Avenging Wrath. You gotta remember that Avenging Wrath is on the global cooldown now. So you went Avenging Wrath, Judgment, Wake of Ashes, and Inquisition. So this is very far from an ideal opener. Ideally, what he would have done is he would have used Blade of Justice or Judgment first, followed by Judgment or Blade of Justice, depending which one you use first. Ideally, you'll use Blade of Justice first, but if you want to use Judgment while you're running in, that's fine. So he has his 3 holy power there. Then he'll use Inquisition. Inquisition will give him his haste and damage buff. You're probably wondering why I said get to 3 first, because of the 4 set. There is a bug right now with the 4 set, because Judgment does reduce the holy power cost of your next spender by 1. It does not properly work with Inquisition. When you cast Inquisition, it will consume that buff, and it won't count as a holy power spent. So you still need to build 3 holy power first to get the full 45 seconds of Inquisition. After you pop Inquisition, then he would have gone ahead and pressed his Avenging Wrath, and then he could have moved on to his Crusader Strike and continued his rotation from there. I do want to point out that my guide is updated. I do go over quite a few openers here. Now, there are a lot of openers now, so I don't have every single one included, but the closest one we have here is for Zeal or Righteous Verdict, Amaranth, Wake of Ashes, and Inquisition. You would follow this same opener here. You would just replace Hammer of Wrath with Crusader Strike. They both generate 1 holy power. Now, if your Blade of Justice did reset, you could use that first, obviously, thanks to either Art of War or Blade of Wrath. Back to the log here, though. So again, that was the first kind of mess up there. Again, opener, very important. If there's one thing you want to do well, you want to make sure it's your opener. We'll quickly go over the buffs here, but we'll go back to tables because timelines is kind of atrocious for this. So we can see here, you only had 1 potion used, so you want to make sure to use your pre-pot and a second pot if possible. So missed out from a potion there. He did use Shield of Vengeance a couple times, which is good. Shield of Vengeance still does do damage, and it will now do damage regardless if you fully use it. It will deal damage equal to the amount of damage it absorbed. That is a good change. So on buffs, there's not really much else to look at. That's all I want to look for. You might be wondering about Inquisition. For Inquisition, we don't want to go based off the uptime. Now, on a single target fight like this, well, it's 2 targets, but it's single target for us. We don't cleave, and the dogs are usually separate, especially in the pre-patch because they hit a lot harder. So what's better to do is look at how much of his damage was done during Inquisition. So we'll just go back to damage done here. We can see here he did 1 million total damage. Again, we'll just go to our source filters here. We'll choose Inquisition. And we can see 968,000 of his damage was during Inquisition, which is good. Your Inquisition buffed damage should be in the high 90s. So 96, this would be like 96.8. Or approximately. That's good. Now, some of this information you can also use WoW Analyzer. WoW Analyzer is updated for Ret. There's a couple bugs with it right now, it seems, so I'll go over those. So we'll go ahead and switch to our WoW Analyzer tab, which we have up here. We've already popped in this log. Again, you can go over here. It'll show you the actual percentages of his stats. But one thing that's not included in logs is what race they are. So this guy is a Blood Elf. And Blood Elves do have 1% crit, so it's missing that 1% crit there. It's not a fault of the WoW Analyzer, it's a fault of the combat logs from WoW. It's just missing. When you first load a log, you get your checklist here, you get your always be casting, whether you're doing good or not, 20% downtime. 20% downtime can be a little bit high, but on a fight like dogs, you might have had to switch targets when the debuff swapped, so that's to be expected. We got use core abilities as often as possible. So Blade of Justice was good, but Crusader Strike and Judgment were a little bit lacking there. So that's something we want to consider. He was also using the Fires of Justice talent, so he had a little bit less RNG in his rotation due to Art of War. Art of War is only 2 procs per minute, so he definitely could have got a bit more use out of Crusader Strike and Judgment. Use your cooldowns. Again, for us, this will be Avenging Wrath and Wake of Ashes when talented. Use procs and buffs efficiently. Again, we got damage empowered by Inquisition, Art of War procs used, Judgment buffs consumed, and Righteous Verdict efficiency. This is one of the bugs. It doesn't appear to be properly reporting for Righteous Verdict. We went over that earlier, and he was sitting about 86% usage or efficiency on that. So one little bug there that I'll make sure to go ahead and report. So Judgment debuffs consumed. Ideally, this should be 100%. So what we can go back and do is we can look at his log. The most common scenario for missing a Judgment is casting Judgment as your last move. So we'll just jump to the end of the timeline. Looking here, Judgment was not his last move. He did cast a Templar's Verdict after that. So probably what happened is he cast his Judgment on a dog, his debuff swap. We had to run over right away. So we missed that one debuff. You want to be careful of things like that when using Judgment. If you're going to swap targets, make sure to consume your buff first. And if it's a fight with adds and you judge an add, make sure the add will live long enough for you to use a spender. Right, Holy Power usage. So again, Holy Power still exists. We got some waste here. We have 4 Holy Power wasted from Blade of Justice. This should be 0. We never want to waste Holy Power with Blade of Justice. This was also true before the pre-patch. For Crusader Strike, we're at 0. And before the pre-patch in Legion, you might run into scenarios where you overcap with Crusader Strike, but that should not happen now. Now that we no longer have a Judgment window, and Judgment is just a single buff, we should have 0 Holy Power wasted from Crusader Strike. Wake of Ashes, we have 5 wasted there. We'll have to jump into that and look at it a bit closer. And from Judgment, we have 4 wasted from Judgment. So Judgment does now give Holy Power if you were not aware. So you want to make sure you never waste Holy Power on Judgment. So if we want to jump further into the Holy Power usage, we'll go back to Warcraft logs. We'll go to Resources. We'll go back to our tables. We'll change the hit points drop down to Holy Power. And we get our initial view here, where it says 3 from Blade of Justice, 4 from Wake. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy there between the analyzer in here. I have not looked into that too much. I'll have to look a bit closer. But we'll change list to the events. And we can look for the O. The O means overcap. So in his opener, he went Judgment, Wake of Ashes. So Judgment gets Holy Power now. He immediately hit Wake. That caused him to waste 1 with Wake, which is not ideal. So we'll scroll down further here. Again, we had a Wake used here, where 1 Holy Power was wasted. So with Wake of Ashes, it is okay to waste 1 Holy Power, assuming that your Blade of Justice is on cooldown for more than 1 GCD. So to check that, we have to do a bit of back and forth here. If you have multiple monitors, it's easier, but I'm recording a video, so I'm going to jump back and forth. We'll go to his timeline here. That was at, was it 53 seconds? Yeah, 53 seconds. And we can see here, when he cast, or when he used Wake of Ashes, it does look like Blade of Justice was on cooldown, so using that Wake there was appropriate. So that's not an issue. We can see here, wasted with Judgment, not good. Judgment, wasted, not good. He wasted both Holy Power from his Blade of Justice. That's really not good. It only generates 2, so if you waste both, definitely not ideal. Another one wasted. Lots of waste there from Blade of Justice, and also from Judgment. Here we have a case where he wasted 2 with Wake of Ashes. In Legion, it was okay to do that in very rare scenarios, but we never want to do that now. The most Holy Power you want to waste with Wake of Ashes is 1. So if we go to the timeline there, we can also see that. That was at 227. So we can see here, you used Judgment, and then Wake. So what happened here is that he should have used a Crusader Strike We can see here his Crusade Strike was coming just off cooldown for 1 charge, and with the 4-piece bonus, he would have gotten 1 extra holy power from Judgment, so that would have been 3. So he should have done Judgment, Crusader Strike, Templar's Verdict, and then Awake. So you could have avoided that. Again, just Judgment wasted there. And one more from Awake at 319. If you want to jump into it, you can definitely do that. So at 319, wasted 1. We can see that Blade of Justice was on cooldown still, so that's okay. So holy power waste, definitely an issue there. You want to make sure you're not wasting any, or you don't have to. And you never want to waste on Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, or Judgment. Wake is the only talent that will potentially waste 1 holy power on every now and then. And also, a couple more important notes here is Inquisition. You want to be careful when you're using Inquisition. If we go to the cooldowns tab here, we can see his cast breakdown. And we can see here that in both of his Avenging Wraths, he had to refresh Inquisition. You never want to refresh Inquisition inside of Avenging Wrath. Before you pop Avenging Wrath, Inquisition should be up. So at the start of the fight, it's very easy. You build your 3 holy power, you use your Inquisition, you pop your Avenging Wrath, and you do your opener. Now later in the fight, what you should do is if Avenging Wrath is coming off of cooldown within 15 seconds, and your Inquisition has 20 seconds or less remaining, you want to refresh your Inquisition with 3 holy power, and that will give you enough time on your Inquisition before Avenging Wrath comes back to have full benefit. And I do have that note here on my guide under the rotation section. But again, ensure Inquisition has more time remaining than the length of Avenging Wrath. If Inquisition is at or below 20 seconds remaining, and the cooldown of Avenging Wrath is less than 15 seconds, you can refresh Inquisition with 3 holy power to avoid having it run out during Avenging Wrath. So important note there, just some good optimization. And I mentioned earlier that he is a Blood Elf, and he never uses Arcane Torrent. It is important to note that Arcane Torrent is on the global cooldown now, so you won't always use it. The appropriate time to use Arcane Torrent now is when all of your moves are on cooldown. If everything's on cooldown, and you have nothing to do, press Arcane Torrent and get a holy power. It still does give 1 holy power. And that pretty much covers it for Ret. The logs are a little bit easier to go over now. That's all you really have to do. If you have any questions about this, definitely go ahead and let me know. But thank you, and I hope you enjoy.